What is hybrid training?
Everyone thinks that it just has to be running and lifting, but it's really just the combination of two kind of seemingly opposing fitness modalities.
How can you make cardio not boring?
Being boring is kind of the point. I think that we can all benefit from doing things that are a little bit more boring in our lives.
There's a lot of people that think that cardio is going to ruin their gains. And then on the other side, cardio is the only way to go. And then lifting is going to make them bulky.
Most people who are worried about cardio killing their gains are not doing enough cardio.
Alyssa, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me back. Again, I'm excited to chat.
Of course. Yeah. Alyssa was on when we were still the Tara Talk, like way in the beginning. Alyssa is someone that I've been following for forever. She's a wealth of knowledge. I'm just super excited that you're back. So thanks for making the time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited.
I would love to chat about hybrid training. I feel like it's very trendy. A lot of people are talking about it, and it's something that you do on your page so much. So what is hybrid training?
Yeah. So that's funny. We were just talking about you being in Austin. I feel like that's the meme-ified capital of hybrid training. So you're next.
But they say that, but I don't know.
I don't know. But so essentially hybrid training, everyone thinks that it just has to be running and lifting, which is what I do. So I get that I play into the cliche of that, but it's really just the combination of two kind of seemingly opposing fitness modalities in the same program, whether that's day, week, training cycle, or even larger training cycles. But essentially you're trying to be proficiently decent at multiple things at once that seem contradictory, right? Or consume time, energy, or resources from one another. And so a lot of the people who push back on hybrid training is they say it's just training like an athlete. It's just concurrent training. And so hybrid training and concurrent training are very similar. Hybrid training is a form of concurrent training, and concurrent training is what the literature calls combining two modes of fitness in the same training program, or whatever it is, or how you think athletes train, right? But the biggest difference is that when we think about how athletes train, they are training with one goal specifically, is to get better at XYZ sport. So they're using other modes of fitness to complement the physical preparedness for that sport, or in off season and or for just baseline fitness and performance. But that is not the main goal of their training program. So an elite basketball player or football player might be very strong and very powerful in training for sport, and they are doing concurrent training approaches for that. But their main and specific goal is to be better at that sport, right? Similarly, somebody who runs and truly is a pure endurance enthusiast, they only care about running, but is just using strength as a way to complement and support and minimize maybe injury risk or be slightly more prepared for that event, is concurrent training, but they're not hybrid training. Hybrid training is when you're trying to truly maximize two things that don't make sense to go together, and you're compromising then on the maximal fitness that you could have if you were doing it in one domain specifically. Now, for most people that are recreational, everyday people doing hybrid training, they're not always doing exactly hybrid training, and that's okay. My slogan for my training stuff is called hybrid on your terms, because you basically get to define what that means and looks like for you, right? So I like to just describe hybrid training on a spectrum. So if you're thinking about strength and endurance in this example, which is what most people are thinking of, so we'll keep to that example today, is you have pure endurance enthusiast on one side and pure strength enthusiast on the other side. And then when you take a step in, you have runners who lift, or lifters who just do enough cardio not to die early. Mm-hmm. And then as you get into that middle range, you kind of get into more hybrid-y, and you can shift across the spectrum. You can be, you can oscillate across the year. You can oscillate it in seasons. It's not always going to be one-to-one, but that's what classic true hybrid training is. But if regular people want to call something that isn't that hybrid training, I do not care. I'm not going to hem their haw. I think it's amazing. I think it's great that people are combining strength and conditioning for once, instead of it just being just strength or just endurance, which I think the industry loves to hyper swing between. And so those are the functional definitions, with the caveat of if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm not maximizing anything. Well, great. You're a hybrid athlete. Congratulations. You're welcome to the club.
Yeah. And I love the way you just explained it too, because it is so nuanced too. And it doesn't have to be, I think a lot of people think that hybrid training is just high rocks, where you're just like running and lifting or doing some sort of strength conditioning type movement. But it really can be two of anything, would you say, right?
Yeah. I mean, you could be a triathlete and also a rock climber. You could be, I don't know, someone who loves to do sprint training and plyometrics, but also a swimmer. Like, I don't like
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, there's not like a clear cut way. I mean, technically, even if you're competing in like bodybuilding and powerlifting in the same yearly cycle, that could be a mode of hybrid training. It doesn't have to be, but really, people are typically thinking of it when combining like opposing stressors on the body, so strength and endurance. But yeah, it doesn't have to be just those things, right? But that's what typically people are thinking of. It can really be, I mean, I'm a multi-person interest enthusiast. I'm trying to move back out west next year, and I'm probably going to start climbing and trying to do a little bit more mountaineering stuff while also lifting and still doing my trail and running. And like that's still hybrid training, even if it's not like I'm training for a marathon and being jacked at the same time. Like that's not the only form of hybrid fitness, maybe in Austin, but like for any other, again, you're getting really close to it, but it can be any combination of things. That's why I like hybrid on your terms, because what do you want to do with your fitness, and how do you want to combine and train for that in a way that makes sense for you, and optimize your max best at not being optimal and max best at multiple or two things at once.
Why do you think it gets a bad rep then?
I think it comes from two things. One, I think that the lifting purist love to act like you only need lifting and bodybuilding and walking, and that's the only thing that is necessary for health, fitness, and performance. So they have this like kind of nose up to like, well, endurance training isn't necessary. You get enough VO2 max and aerobic health benefits and blah, 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 blah from lifting and walking. And I'm like, yeah, it's not like those are great things to do, right? So I think that sometimes our industry is so bodybuilding or powerlifting centric. Like I think like we both came up in the industry when like that's what everyone was doing. Like we're microwaving Quest bars, we're training for either a powerlifting meet or a bodybuilding competition. I think we went the strength side a little bit more than the bodybuilding side. Because I did that. That was me, right? And there was this hyper swing away from all of this. And I think that still so much infiltrates so much of just like everything in the industry. But now we're seeing this athletic like claw coming into it from like, hey, being athletic and training multiple ways is a good thing. But then you get the people from that side who are like in my comment sections, typically these washed up high school athlete, middle-aged dudes are like, that's just lifting and strength and conditioning. I've been doing that my whole life. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like amazing. Great. But like, there's this like hem-ha of like almost gatekeeping of like, well, I've always been an athlete and this is what I've always done. This is stupid. And it's like, well, no, because again, for the reasons I explained earlier, but two, like also like, this is a net positive. Like if this is a trend and the industry is cringy as it can be, and don't get me wrong, I cringe at some of the hybrid stuff too. It's a net positive of what like people should be doing. Like it's not like we're convincing people that like, I don't know, like F45 is elite fitness and like that's all they need to maximize human potential or something like that, right? Like that's not a great example, but like it's not a harmful trend. It's like, hey guys, doing cardio and strength is actually possible and good for you. And you're like, okay, cool. Like, why are we mad about this? So I think it's just a little bit of that like strength side who just like hasn't fully drank the Kool-Aid of cardio yet. And I love seeing those people when they start doing true cardio or realizing they need it. And they're like, oh, this is hard. Like, this is not the same. And I love that, like, just seeing that click a little bit. But then you also just have like this, I've been an athlete my whole life type people, hybrid training isn't a real thing. It's just being an athlete. And you're like, yeah, to a degree, yeah, it absolutely is. But most people have either been endurance purist or strength meathead bodybuilders, right? Like there's not really been this push to combine them. Other than like CrossFit, right? CrossFit was the thing for years. That was the one form of hybrid fitness that was like combining multiple modalities in the same form of training. But now we're seeing people do it in other ways. And yeah, people can be really, really douchey about it. I fully agree. It can be really insufferable. But for the most part, it's like, this is like, besides people taking it to the extreme where they're a cliche with it, it's like, yeah, we're being above averagely good on multiple things that are what we should be doing for health and performance. So like, yay. So I think that's where some of the like disagreement comes from. And obviously I get a lot of YouTube comments that are these types of people. And I'm like, and the problem is my response. I'm like, and
Yeah. Gosh, there's so many ways we can go for this. But I love what you said about a lot of people in strength training realizing how important cardio is. I'm honestly one of them because I went so far into the strength training and I was like, lift heavy, this is awesome. And I would get in the walking. So first and foremost, How do you define cardiovascular workouts?
Yeah. So I actually just did a podcast this morning. So I always give the disclaimer for people who don't know me. I am like the cardio girl, but I am a beefcake meathead through and through. I think if you don't know me and you're listening to this, you should know that like I'm 5'1" and nothing but muscle. Like, so I feel like when I start talking about cardio, people are like, you're just a running purist. And I'm like, not really.
Yeah,
Like,
look at me, please.
I'm way more of a strength athlete than I am a runner, which is so funny because people associate me with the running and cardio. Anyway, that's my disclaimer for people listening to this, that I'm not just like some like rinky-dink endurance lover. But so when we think about cardio training, it is a continuous cyclical style of exercise. Typically, it really is like single modal. When we're talking about true classic cardio, I'll give you guys caveats of things in a second here. That is repetitive and or maintain and sustain long enough that you have a specific physiological stressor on your body. So you're having both at the heart and lung level. So you're increasing blood output, increasing oxygen delivery. But I think people only think of cardio here. They stop at the heart. They think heartbeat fast equals cardio, right? But they forget that also cardio is a stress, stimulus, and adaptation then in the vascular system, delivering that blood and oxygen-rich blood to our muscles, but also the expansion and development of capillaries, which are like our little mini side highways off of the main highways. Honestly, Texas is a great example of that because the Texas driving infrastructure is like the big main highways and the little tiny side highways. Those are the veins and those are the capillaries. So we improve and increase those or stress or strain those. And then at the muscular level, people do not think about muscle and endurance and cardio training. They think of muscle with lifting, but your muscles are also huge parts of your metabolism and they have a response to aerobic cardio, endurance training, whatever word you're using, that requires not only that delivery of oxygen to it, but also the transfer of it into your muscle cell, but then the uptake and use of it by our mighty mitochondria, powerhouses of the cells, to turn into energy metabolism. So cardio is specifically a stressor that plays on all of those systems. It's not just, hey, my heart rate is elevated or that felt hard, so that made it cardio. And I think the reason that's so hard for people to understand is there's an aerobic component to almost everything. You exist. You existing is an aerobic activity, right? So like just because your heart rate got elevated when you were lifting, or you have to breathe harder in between because you're recovering, because your aerobic system helps contribute to that recovery, doesn't make that an aerobic activity or cardio activity. It's still good for you. It's still net positive, but it's not the same as a specific stressor that's coming from cardio training. So cardio is typically something that gets your heart rate up at least 50 to 60% of your max heart rate. Typically, I like to just say like an easy rule of thumb is like, is your heart rate higher than 100 beats per minute? Obviously, that's not exactly 50 to 60% for most people, but most people probably fall in that range. And I also just think it's a good minimum. Like it's a good, safe, easy minimum. I don't have data to back that. I just think I like people like they like numbers, right? It's so much easier to just say a number. So don't at me if you're like, that's not backed. It's just a rough estimate. For an extended period of time, whether that's continuous, so 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes, an hour or plus, or it is a specific interval-based structure that's in an aerobic mode or modality that's interval-based in a way that it's stressing these systems and you're recovering in the between. And typically it's going to be activities that are single mode, or it can be multi-mode, but they're typically things like biking, running, the rower, ski erg, stairmaster, incline walking, hiking, the elliptical, swimming, dancing. Like walking can be it if it is again intense enough. So like whenever I list out all these things, people are like, but what about this? What about this? What about this? There's also the bucket of activities that everyone wants to know what about is that have an aerobic overlapping component that aren't purely cardio, but aren't always purely strength, because everything in fitness and sport also exists on a spectrum. So you can have like boxing or group fitness classes or like high Roxy type stuff, training condition like we were using, for example, before. Some CrossFit stuff will fall more aerobic. Some CrossFit stuff will fall more a combo. Some CrossFit stuff will fall more strength. So it's always about like what is included in it. But when I'm talking about cardio, I'm referring to like pure cardio strict modalities. That doesn't mean the other stuff is bad or you can't use it, or might not have like a component of cardiovascular fitness, but it's usually not as significant or as stressful enough or specific enough as like just traditional, boring, repetitive cardio.
How can you make cardio not boring?
I think that one, the answer that people hate it being boring is kind of the point. I think that we can all benefit from doing things that are a little bit more boring in our lives, especially in a world where we're like stimulated by screens all the time. But that also doesn't help get people to do exercise unless like they're bought in and they're ready to do it. Like when people genuinely want to run and they're like running's boring, I'm like, well, that's the point. Keep doing it. Like that's why we're doing it, right? You get better at it by doing it. But if you don't love cardio and you hate it or you think it's boring, one, make it interesting, right? I think people they think of cardio as only having to be like milling away on running on a treadmill for an hour, and they hate running. If you don't like running, don't run. I'm a runner, so I think people automatically assume that I think everyone has to run. And I'm like, no, if you don't want to run, don't run. If you want to get better at running, you're gonna have to run. Like if you want to do a high rocks, you're gonna have to run. But if you want to just have good cardiovascular fitness and health, you never have to run a day in your life. Do I think it's good for humans to do some bipedal locomotion? Yeah, that's great. But if you hate it, don't do it. So you can play with things like intervals, switching between machines, using strength activities that aren't really cardio mixed in with traditional cardio in that circuit style fashion. You can, the one thing that it comes to cardio training that I don't think people who don't do a lot of cardio think about is that with strength, we really encourage you to do the same thing week after week after week after week so you can adapt to it. But unless you have a specific goal with your cardio training, like you're training for an event or a race or a specific component of fitness, cardio is actually a really fun and great way to get variety into your week of training. So that way you maybe have your 2, 3, 4 lifting days that are like the same every week, but your cardio can be different. Or even if it's kind of semi-structured, can still be variable within that semi-structured. So you could have a mix of zone 2, you could have a mix of high hard intervals, you could have a mix of erg work. So when I say erg work, I mean like maybe you go from like a ski erg to a rower to like a bike and back and forth or running in between those, or like your high roxy, metcon-y, circuity type stuff. So cardio is a really great way to build something variable and fun and interest in your life. And if you don't care about the specific stimulus of it, or you're just using it for general health, you can kind of do whatever you want. And the less you do, the more intense it could be without you having to worry about it being like too much. The more you do, the more some of it should be easier. But like, that's a great way. If you're only doing cardio 2 or 3 days a week, do kind of like make it fun, make it interesting. It can change week to week. Like in my app for people who aren't like specifically doing training for high rocks or training for a running event or a hike, we have like on-demand cardio that changes every single week. And it's intentionally variable and different so that it can be interesting for people. Now, sometimes if you want to do specific things, like a specific HIIT workout, do HIIT, right? Like you can do that the same thing week after week and you don't have to change it to keep getting benefit, to stress it. And sometimes that's good, kind of like lifting where it's repeated. But like otherwise, you can just make it fun and interesting. Maybe one week you do a hike. Maybe one week you do a long swim. Maybe one week you go kayaking with your family. Maybe one week you go out dancing. Like it doesn't have to be boring. And honestly, you can make this the thing in your week that is different and variable and fun, or just like whatever. Like on my app in my off season, I could just open it and be like, what do I want to do today? And cherry pick a workout. And like, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. You heard it here first, you guys. Cardio is not just running. So if you do not like to run, you don't have to just run. She just gave you like 20 different things. And there's so many more things out there. Like find what you enjoy, but also like have fun doing it and really make it fun for you. But I think the next place I want to go here is because there's a lot of people that think that cardio is going to ruin their gains. And then on the other side, cardio is the only way to go. And then lifting is going to make them bulky. So
yes,
let's talk to that next.
Those are like this 2 sides of the same coin. Those are the opposite sides of the industries, equal difference of what they say, right? And the reality is like we honestly are seeing with more and more literature coming out on concurrent training that it's not really actually impacting muscle hypertrophy as much as people think it is. Honestly, it might have more of an impact on like pure strength output and or like maximal effort. And then again, there's caveats with hybrid training of like what are you adapted to and can you tolerate? Most people who are worried about cardio killing their gains are not doing enough cardio. Just like most people who are worried about getting bulky are usually not lifting enough to get bulky. So if you are not meeting the exercise guidelines, first of all, you should be, right? Like point blank period. 2, you will probably not see a ton of interference of cardio with your lifting. 1, if you like adapt slowly and adjust to your own fitness level as you go. And or account for the fact that when you first start adding it in, your lifting might suffer a little bit. You might need to pull back a little bit until you adapt to it and you can kind of go back to normal. Till you're honestly getting to that like next step in the exercise guidelines of like 300 minutes plus per week. So like that's 5 hours of cardio per week. And I have found personally, anecdotally, like with me and my clients, is that the more fit people get, the less it starts to interfere at higher levels of cardio and or like with more volume, because you're just adapted to what you're doing, right, over time. But like most people doing like 1.5 to 3 hours of cardio a week, you're probably not going to have such a meaningful impact on your strength, performance, hypertrophy, especially if you like space it out across your week and or like are intentional about when you're doing easier versus hard stuff. So like most people aren't doing enough. The caveat is that when they start doing it, you will probably feel like your performance is impacted in an acute short-term sense, because you're asking for a recovery, you're stealing from what else you've already been doing. So usually I recommend to like lifters adding it in, like pull back 10 to 20% for a few weeks, add it in, let your body adapt to it, and then go back to normal and you'll probably be fine. If anything, honestly, having that increased aerobic fitness and capacity, as well as just better general physical preparedness, you probably will actually have like better vasodilation in the gym. You'll have better recovery. You'll have better pumps. You'll potentially have more energy and feel better, that you actually will indirectly become more fit and more athletic overall and actually have it improve your hypertrophy and strength responses, right? Like being a purist is great and being specific is important, but also not the detriment of like, we don't just train in like a silo, right? Like we have all these energy systems and or contributions to our general fitness and health as well. And so you're not doing enough to do it. But if you are worried about your gains, there's a few ways that you can approach cardio that can help like mitigate this or reduce this. And one is nutrition. Eat enough protein. You will probably have to increase your carbs to some degree when you start adding it in, or if you're doing more, because there's more of a carbohydrate demand in or utilization of aerobic and cardio training. So typically, like I tell people, like match your carb intake to your activity levels. And the more aerobic activity you do, typically the more carbs that you're going to need. That doesn't mean that like strength and hypertrophy doesn't require carbs. It does. It absolutely does. You're just going to have a higher use of it with aerobic or cardio training, especially if you're adding in a lot of it. Kind of, again, I'm not like, don't go eat 1,000 more calories a day. Like that's not what I'm saying, but slightly increase, especially like around training. If you're feeling depleted, you feel like you're not recovering, you feel like it is impacting it. Nutrition can account and overlap for so much of that. And then 2 is keep training hard, train to effort, train to quality. Don't just start sandbagging your lifts. And if you're really fatigued from your cardio, again, you might just need to like adjust a little bit with some of those things. 3, don't run because okay, I've said that in a really dramatic way. Don't run because running might be more like central nervous system demanding if you don't want to run. Now, again, I run a lot. My clients run. Me and my clients still have muscle. There's tons of people who have muscle and strength and run. So it's not that you can't run and do this, but if you're such a lifting purist, like you can stick to lower impact modalities like the bike or rower or like less, like not as much fatiguing activities, so that doesn't have that carryover as much in your gym, because the central nervous system is playing a big role in our strength and power output and what we're doing in the gym, how much weight we're moving, and or like how hard we can push and the efforts we can take things to. So if you feel like you're like more fatigued and or you want to reduce that, you can just do things like bike intervals or row or ski erg or things like that. So you can reduce that impact there, as well as you can utilize like intensity intentionally. So zone 2 gets talked about a lot, and zone 2 is both overhyped and appropriate depending on what the situation we're talking about. But zone 2 is great because you can do a lot of it without it being really fatiguing. And it's a great way to add in cardiovascular training that won't interfere as much with potentially strength training sessions. And so you can do a lot of it without as much interference. Whereas like a sprint interval training workout or a really high intensity interval training workout may have some like interference and carryover, just in the sense of like they're more fatiguing. They're also more demanding on our body as a whole metabolically. So you might have some like interference there. Now, does that mean I don't think that people should go hard or intense at least once a week? No, you should do some intensity. I think that's a good thing. But you can adjust and manage your cardio across the week. So you're doing either zone 2 stuff because that makes sense because it reduces fatigue, or you are spacing out like higher, harder, intense days with easier sessions or easier days in between kind of thing. So like those are ways that you can kind of reduce or mitigate those impacts. If you're only caring about like, I'm true like blue bodybuilder, power lifter, Olympic weightlifting athlete kind of thing. Meeting the exercise guidelines of 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous to hard per week is a minimum we should all reach for if we're physically able or capable of. And then, of course, like if you love to walk and just lift, add in 1 or 2 like hard effort cardio days a week and just be active and do your training session. And like you're probably going to be okay. It's all about whether you're doing it for health or maximizing it for health, minimums for health versus maximums for health versus performance. Like those are all different things with cardio. And I think people automatically assume like you need to train for a marathon and do 10 hours a week of endurance. And yeah, that might interfere with your gains a little bit kind of thing. But also you can maintain a lot of muscle. I don't want people to think like, well, I wanted to train for this high rocks or this half marathon or whatever it is, but now I'm going to lose all my gains. No, on the contrary, you need to train hard and smart and not just drop off lifting and keep the quality there. Like less, but more, but higher quality is really the approach with hybrid training and lifting that I think a lot of people like. They want to slap cardio onto like a bodybuilding or maximal powerlifting program. And it doesn't work because you're having to compromise things like that. But the one thing they make the mistake of is they reduce effort instead of volume. So do less reps or sets, do more strength focused work, but keep it higher quality. And that's going to give you the stimulus that you need to maintain that muscle or just a good degree of strength when you're training for these races and events. Honestly, I've done this through so many running training cycles. And when I first started hybrid training, I lost like 10 pounds the first year, of most of it muscle, because I couldn't quite figure out how to balance the lifting and the running. And what I've done a lot better job over the years of maintaining really good muscle density with my endurance training. And that approach really is the best bang for your buck, because so many people complain that it's too time consuming, but also really fatiguing and hard on the contrary, like in the endurance thing from the lifting training. And so you can still be strong and fit and also do higher or moderate high volumes of endurance training too. This isn't me to say that like you can't also have muscle and do it. But for the strength and purists who are so afraid to do anything that it raises their respiratory rate, it's good for your health. You should do it. Plenty of jacked people in the industry now are doing cardio. So if that isn't proof enough, I know that that's not hard science, but like how many jacked runners do we have to see before we trust that like you won't lose it all? And I think so many people underestimate that most people in the hybrid space were really jacked and strong first. They built that muscle. It's so much easier to maintain it or maintain it in waves of sometimes it might fall off a little bit and you build it back up really easily with seasons around training than it is to try to like maximally build both at the same period of time, which is why I recommend like a seasons approach anyway, or like phases of specifically building that. But like if you have this amazing strength base and hypertrophy base already, you're going to just have an easier time maintaining that while adding in the cardio than if someone was to like start from scratch doing both. Sorry, that was a lot of information, but like.
Well, it's funny because as you were talking, I was like, well, gosh, like look around right now at hybrid training athletes. They are so jacked, but also they can run 5-6 minute miles. The first person I think of is Nick Farr from BPN. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's able to like, but he goes through periodization. He obviously has a whole team of trainers and all that, but do you feel like I'm going to put this in quotes, easier to go from a more, I mean, you kind of already answered this, but to go from more of a strength-based or bodybuilder into more of a hybrid athlete because you have that foundation already? And then vice versa, like what if you are an endurance athlete and like trying to put on some muscle too and become more of a hybrid athlete?
So I have 2 separate answers to that. I think it's easier to be a jacked hybrid athlete if you come from a strength training background. But the one thing about hybrid training, especially in the traditional social media sense that people often don't realize, like if you think about like the BPN bros or like any of those types of hybrid athletes out there, whether that's, Nick or anyone else, there's a million now at this point in time, right? I'm like, there's so many. I'm like, I names are hard.
Yeah. He's just the first person I thought of.
Yeah. It just, I mean, he gets a lot of credit for it, which I'll give the credit here. Like Alex Viada is actually the one who like really founded all this. I think a lot of people think Nick spearheaded this, but Alex like wrote the book on it in like 2015. Honestly, Alex came before me, but I'm like the female next wave on that, I feel like sometimes. Yeah. But anyway, I always just feel like Alex deserves a lot of credit that he doesn't get in this space. So I always like to plug that if I can. But anyway, all that to say, hybrid training is actually so much endurance training with a little bit of strength. It is endurance training. Like if you are trying to be the fast marathoner, the fast high roxer, the fast hard fit, like It is 60-40. It is not, it is so much less lifting and strength training than I think people realize it is. Even if people seem like there's a big difference when people say like I hybrid train and I lift 5 or 6 days a week. There's such a difference between like the days per week means nothing, honestly, because I think a lot of people cling to that. I'm like, yeah, but like there's a lot of people who are like going through the motions of like these quick bodybuilding type workouts versus like pure strength workouts. Like I'm a big fan of like less full body, higher quality days and have the rest of the time allocated to endurance. I also think that works a lot for more regular people. But all that to say, I'm tangenting. Having a really strong aerobic foundation and or endurance background, honestly, I think ends up resulting in more impressive hybrid athletes if they take the time to build strength or muscle or actually take the time to do that. Because yes, muscle and strength gaining is really, 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 really hard to do, right? But if you're really lean and an endurance athlete and you put on just a little bit of muscle, you look so jacked and impressive compared to what you actually are, which was what we're seeing in the hybrid space. And this isn't me trying to shade talk any of those people. It's just the perception that the public has around that, right? I talk about this a lot with my coaches because some of my coaches are just freaking these ripjack super fit dudes, but like a lot of them have had to shift more endurance-y, but they've maintained their jackness because they had that history and baseline of it, of course. But so much of the training with hybrid is endurance. And if you have a strong background in endurance training, you're going to be more impressive overall because you're going to be able to just simply be faster and or fitter and more impressive at this level. And that's what's a lot of is happening in the hybrid space right now. Like I will literally use me as an opposite example. I am so much more of a natural strength power. Like I'm strong. I'm strong and muscly and jacked. And while I have ran my entire life, I've never been like a phenomenal aerobic endurance athlete. I was a midfield athlete, sprinting, powerful, short burst type athlete for most of my life. And that is where my genetic predisposition lies. And I do benefit from the fact that I've been endurance training for most of my life. But like for me, so many of my limitations come from my aerobic training and my running training and my running skills and things like that. And I come from the strength training world. Whereas if I had a more impressive history, maybe I ran cross country and track in college instead of playing lacrosse. Maybe I went down the rabbit hole of running marathons in my mid to late 20s instead of doing powerlifting and strongman for a little bit and detouring there. Maybe I'd be a better, more impressive runner, right? But like that's where I think people lack in those gaps of understandings. Like these people aren't just running sub 3-hour marathons because they're jacked. They're doing it because they have these fantastic, impressive aerobic foundations, training histories as endurance athletes historically, or just an incredible genetic predisposition for being aerobically fit. And none of those are bad. There's no negative thing about that. But so it's like hard because it's like, but then also most of the people who are super jacked and are really strong and have impressive physiques did that first before they started hybrid training. So like both of those things are true. But what you will notice is that most of those people who are super jacked before, most of their training is a lot. Like Nick Bear right now is training for an Ironman. He's doing 3 to 4 hours of endurance a day. He's not lifting 6 days a week for 2 hours. He is jacked, yes, because he was jacked at one point, but that's a great example because obviously everyone knows that it is and we used it. But like he's doing hours and hours and hours of endurance training. He is not like maximizing strength at this period of time, but you can get away with it because of that. So like, I just don't think people realize in order to be like truly good and impressive at hybrid training, like it is endurance training plus holding on with a death grip as much as you can to the strength work. It is showing up and doing it fatigued and tired and putting in the efforts and work that you can. It is hard. It is hard. It's so hard. Sometimes I just wish that I was like a lifter who just went through the motions. I cannot tell you how much some weeks I was like, damn, why do I have to brand as hybrid training and not just a runner who lifts? You know what I mean? Like it would just be so much easier. But it's really 60-40, especially if you want to be good at like, I'm running the marathons, I'm running the ultras, I'm doing the high rocks proficiently and the hybrid training. You're just not lifting as much as people think that you are. But if you have the baseline and background in it, you don't have to maintain it, or you can just in between seasons of that, have a period of time specifically focused on like rebuilding that back up. So I know that seems confusing for your general audience, but like basically if you're skinny and weak, go get strong, go spend a specific period of time getting strong. And if you're jacked but get winded going up the steps, spend a period of time doing a butt ton of cardio. Like that's usually like the opposite but true answer. What you suck at in hybrid fitness is where you start, honestly. Like that's usually where, like my baseline of hybrid fitness is if you lack aerobic training or you lacked strength and skill, start there. And whatever your weakness is, you need to spend more time like in that area developing that. So it's kind of like depends on where they're coming from.
Yeah, yeah. And that's all so important and so necessary to hear because what you're good at is something that you're always going to go back to. Like I'm always going to lift, but I don't want to like do a ton of endurance. And I like what you said because hybrid training, especially like the high rock stuff that we all know and see, it is a running sport. People tell me all the time that I should try it. And I'm like, I don't run, so it's not going to be good for me. I would have to specifically train to run to actually get better at that. But the other thing I wanted to chat about is this predisposition to genetics that you've been talking about. You know, if you are similar to us that has this like sprinting, more powerful background, is there a time and place where you could get to be more of an endurance athlete and actually be better at that than your explosiveness just from our genetics?
So there's always going to be like a genetic ceiling on things like VO2 max. And even though like things like VO2 max, like I've even said this, it's not the most important parameter for endurance performance. To a degree though, like if you're genetically predisposed to have a genetic ceiling of a VO2 max of 45 versus 75, that's going to make a bigger difference in your performance, right? So there are some people who are more genetically predisposed to having just like higher predisposition for these genetic ceilings of aerobic training. Like they're just by nature. Also, people like us, this is a massive caveat. If I lost 10 pounds of muscle, I'd probably be a faster runner because I would have less tissue that would require less oxygen for metabolic demand. That is not me saying that thinner is or smaller is always faster, but there is going to be a component of like density and power that is at play with hybrid training, you know, is a cost of that, right? More muscle requires more energy, more calories, more oxygen. I really don't want people to take that as me saying like don't gain muscle or get strong, but there is like that is something that's like an unspoken reality is that I know that I would be better at endurance training if I just went and hyper swung specialized in it, right? Kind of thing. And again, this is me saying this to someone who's like 95th percentile of muscle mass from a woman. Like we're not talking like little frail old lady. So please guys take that with like so many caveats. So there is that component of like muscle is metabolically costly and it's heavy and, or it potentially can be a component of this. So there's that too. And for me, what's funny right now with my training is like, I'm not really trying to train intentionally to like put on necessarily weight or mass, but like I've been gaining weight and getting leaner while also getting faster. So there's always the nuance of like faster and performing better is always performing better regardless of this kind of thing. But my biggest thing with most people is like, regardless of your genetics, you will never know what your body is capable of until you expose it to the stimulus of that. So me, pure enthusiast powerlifting, Alyssa, had a VO2 max of like 40. She got winded running 2 miles. She struggled with just basic cardio stuff. I felt horrible. I was recovering more poorly in the gym. I felt that difference versus I ran 100 miles last year. Like I'm not like a super impressive, crazy fit marathoner, but I'm probably going to run a sub 4-hour marathon for my first road marathon here. Like I ran a 5K in like just under 23 minutes kind of thing. Like those aren't bad performances for somebody who's strong, muscle, strength predominant. Because your muscles will respond to the stimulus you give them. And you can shift muscle cell types in response to that. You can also improve oxidative pathways in your body to get better at using oxygen for oxygen and or improving fat metabolism or have more mitochondria, more efficient mitochondria. Like those are all training stimuluses. So everybody has a genetic ceiling on that. Like, or we'd all be Olympians, right? Like the 2-hour marathon guys, probably 90% type 1 muscle fibers. Where I'm probably predisposed to be more type 2 muscle fibers, but there is fluidity and flexibility with those where they can shift to be more hybrid type, which is funny that they're called a hybrid fiber, and be more oxidative and be better at that in nature. So I think that there is that potential. This is like kind of getting nerdy, but there was some interesting studies in the CrossFit space of looking at like more aerobically prone genetic athletes versus more anaerobically prone genetic athletes. And sometimes like there might be issues with that recovery and the oxygen use and delivery that comes with things. So there might be like a higher fatigue cost of some of that stuff for somebody who's more efficient at it. But most of us don't know our fiber type, but we also can tell when we're genetically predisposed to something, right? Like I'm probably a faster sprinter right now without sprint training if I just went and did it than I am at any flat out running sport that I am. And I know that, right? But I've still chosen to do ultra marathons and all of this and certain stuff. And I am getting better, and you can get better. Your genetics just determine your limit. They don't determine what you could do. Just like somebody who's naturally inclined to be a sub 3-hour marathoner could still get really strong and fit and fast. Your body will adapt to what you give it and the stress you impose on it. And I think my thing that I hate is people always say, like, my genetics aren't for that. But I'm like, have you ever given your body enough stress and stimulus to know if that's actually true? And if you haven't, you can't say that, right? Like you can't. So I usually always revert to like, it's a training response and adaptation. If you want to get better for something, you have to train it. Does that mean that you will become the best in the world? No, because we'd all be the best in the world. We know that hard work beats talent. Talent doesn't work hard unless there's a huge genetic predisposition for it. Just like I assume a lot of people here listening probably aren't women who are going to deadlift 400 pounds in their life like we have. I'm pretty sure you've deadlifted 400 pounds, right? Or close.
375.
Okay, really, really close. But like those are crazy numbers for most women of our size, right? So, but they could lift maybe 250 or 275 with strength training or whatever that looks like for them. So there's going to be limits to things, but you can also train different physiological parameters where I might never have a VO2 max of 70. But if I can get my lactate threshold to be at 80% of my VO2 max instead of 70% of it, I'm going to move a lot faster and more efficient. I can build an aerobic base. I can do miles. I can do time. I can do volume. I can shift that stimulus forward in my body. Then I'll find my own genetic limit and ceiling within that, but that doesn't make it impossible. So genetics just determine your ceiling. They don't determine what you're capable of.
Do you think it's important for people to know their VO2 max?
I think most people are better off knowing their 5K time or their 1 mile time and improving that. VO2 max isn't important for health, but it's just a proxy. It's not going to be accurate unless you do it in a lab test. There's indirect test and measure. And I know that people find it cool and interesting. Yeah. Your watches can be like okay estimates depending on the workout, but it's all about like the workouts and the data that you plug into them. But most people obsess about that. VO2 max isn't going to be your number one limiter in performance for most people. It's probably going to be just one, you're not training enough. 2, lactate threshold. Again, VO2 max plays a role, but it's like not the end all be all people make it out to be, because if your VO2 max is here, but your lactate, like, people can't see me in the podcast, but your lactate threshold is so far below it, it doesn't matter where your VO2 max is. It matters that you're just more fit so you can shift that forward. But from a health or performance perspective, people always obsess over it. And I'm usually like, just go get fitter or faster at like an objective thing, because that's a reflection of improvements of that. Like if you shave 2 minutes off your 5K time, I care more about that than like what your VO2 max is, because at the end of the day, that's reflective of improved fitness, improved metabolic efficiency. Those are the things that VO2 max is essentially indirectly reflecting of. And honestly, like going from just like very poor to like low VO2 max has such a significant benefit for health that like, having a higher VO2 max is great, but not everybody's going to have an elite level VO2 max, no matter how hard they train or try. But that doesn't mean that like you're unhealthy. But like if your mile time gets faster, your 5K time gets faster, or like you guys can do these on bikes. Like you don't have to do these necessarily. Like, you can do a 2K row or whatever that looks like. That's what I care more about is like, is your performance improving? Because that usually means the things that we want to improve are moving forward. But it's cool. If you want to test your VO2 max, go for it. I've done probably, I don't even know, hundreds and hundreds of VO2 max tests in my life. They're super cool. But get it actually interpreted in a way that's meaningful for you. But if you're like recreationally active, it probably doesn't matter.
And I would say for the most part, the audience that's listening right now is more in the general population. They're athletes still, but they're not, they don't keep a lot of this data. So the other thing I was going to ask here is you've talked a little bit about days and how that doesn't really matter when it comes to hybrid training. But for the most part, the general population can usually only work out maybe 3 or 4 times a week. So how could someone structure their week with a hybrid kind of setup?
Yeah. So one of the things that I love with hybrid training and my approach that I take, I call it the seasons approach. And this is something that like I kind of came up with a few years ago as my approach to hybrid training, because athletes train in seasons. Athletes are cyclical. Athletes spend time focusing on one preseason, season, postseason, like, you know what I mean? Recovery. Like they have these different periods of time with different shifts and focuses. And so when we think about only having a few days a week to train, I think people freak out because they want to try to do, they think of hybrid training in the short term and not the long term. And hybrid training is about raising your floor over time, lifting up what your baseline capacity is in both strength or cardio over time so that you can essentially do more total work of what you were doing than you were before. So you might have this idealized week in your head, which if you're just generally training and that works for you and you do it week after week, year after year, great. But if you're trying to get specifically better at stuff, you might oscillate between maybe one season you're doing only 2 days of lifting and then you're doing 2 days of cardio. Or maybe like you're doing 2 lifts and one of them has a cardio attached to that lift and you have 2. So you have like 3 cardio days and 2 lift days. Maybe you have a season of life where you're doing 3 lifts and like 1 formal cardio day, maybe 1 shorter, harder cardio day on the other lift, or, you know, that's just what you're doing. Like it's about what makes sense for you and your goals. The reality is hybrid training sometimes is a lot of training, and for 3 or 4 days a week, it's hard to do it with. I really think like the 3-3 split or the 2-3 split is a great baseline for a lot of people if they're trying to have like specific hybrid goals, right? Again, we're talking different than like, I'm a general population regular person who's just trying to strengthen and do enough cardio to improve my health and fitness and performance in 60 minutes a day because I have a 9 to 5 and kids. Versus like I have a ton of clients who do hybrid train and fall into those buckets, but it's about how much you want and have to give, right? So I think like the 2-3 or the 3-3, so that's like 1 workout a day is a great like minimum for people. And you could do those just the amount of time based off what you have. But if you only have 3 or 4 days a week, it might be either splitting sessions in between strength and cardio so you can get them in on one of those days. So maybe it's 30 minutes of strength training or 40 minutes of strength training and then like a 20-minute HIIT session or sprint interval session at the end of it. And then maybe it's one more extensive actual like 60-minute strength session. And then maybe it's 1 day of more formal cardio, or maybe it's like 2 split days and 1 full strength day. And you're only doing the 2 short sprint interval training sessions because you're not doing a ton of cardio and you can't get a lot in. So you're just doing short, efficient, hard. Maybe it's the CrossFit approach where you do some strength stuff and then you do a Metcon or some cardio after. Maybe some seasons it's less lifting and more of that's cardio. Maybe some seasons it's more lifting and more of that's cardio, and you're oscillating kind of between that and what you're doing across the week and the year. So again, I never want to hem people's haw and be like, you can't do this in 3 days a week. It really just depends on your goal. If you're just doing health and fitness, amazing. At least lift at least 2 days. Try to get 2 hard cardio sessions in a week, fit that into your life where it can, walk and be active as much as you can outside of it. But if you start to have like more specific goals, like you want to train for things, you want to run, you want to race train, like you want to do a high rocks, you want to do all these things, you're probably going to have to do like, I usually have a minimum of like 3 days a week of running or cardio because I feel like that's what you need to kind of get in what you need for most of those goals. And then my minimum for lifting is like 2 days a week of lifting. Within that, but I don't want people to think that you can't do this in less. But like less is usually more general fitness, health, performance than like I'm trying to maximize my potential in this goal versus like, honestly, this is where Gen Pop people listening, regular people listening to this podcast, like a lot of people in this hybrid space are training a lot each week. And you can choose to do that, but you don't have to do that to be healthy. You don't have to do that to be fit. You don't have to do that to get like decently fit, right? I get a lot of backlash where people are like, I don't have 2 hours a day to train. And I'm like, but you follow me because I'm somebody who trains for 2 hours a day. Like, that's why you're following me, because this is what I do. Like, this is my thing. But like, you don't have to do that in order to do that. And I've thought about that a lot, even when my life gets busy. I cut corners all the time in my strength stuff. And I think the biggest thing that people can take away is if you need more time for cardio, cut the fluff in your strength. You guys want to do these million reps, million sets. And I know you have so much information on how not to train stupidly. You want to lift 1 million days a week and do all of the volume, but you could be so much more efficient and effective with like less is more and higher quality in your lifting that can make that space in time for the cardio within your week.
Yeah, gosh, that's so awesome. And there's like you've mentioned this entire time, it can look different for each person, what level that you're at. Even just saying like you can fit it in 3 days a week, you might get to a point at 3 days a week where you're just like, this is awesome. I actually want more. And that'll give you the capacity to actually add in another day. And then that's you deciding what that next goal is. So also
Yeah.
love what you said about, testing your mile or your 5K time. That gives you a goal to then just improve on. So that's really helpful. I'd love to talk about recovery because obviously as we get into doing more, our body tends to be more fatigued. We might feel more sore. So as a hybrid athlete yourself, like what is some like really awesome recovery protocols?
So my approach to recovery is the most unsexy, straightforward thing that
Yeah.
people hate. They hate to hear it. One, I'm repetitive and boring in my training. Less novel stimulus, less different stimulus. My lifting doesn't really change week to week. Little things might change here and there, but it's mostly pretty similar. So it's not fatiguing, novel, new. That leads to a lot of soreness. A lot of people complain with running and lifting or hybrid training that like that's an issue for the recovery is the strength is interfering with it. Stop changing your strength all the time. You're going to get more efficient. It's going to be less metabolically difficult. You're going to have less soreness and fatigue. I keep my lifting consistent. So that's a huge thing. It's also, I'm pretty consistent with my training too and repetitive and boring because then there's like the less new and novel it is, the less fatiguing it is. I will say personally, training for high rocks was a lot more fatiguing than training for a marathon and lifting, even though my overall training volume is higher, because I also have way more zone two, easier, recoverable, less intense effort, even though my mileage and time is higher right now than when I was doing a high rocks. That intensity component is hard. And for a lot of people, you can't handle intensity and volume at the same time. So you might need to be more specific about like, hey, I can only handle this much intensity. More is not always better unless you can recover and handle it. I think a lot of people want to hammer themselves with intensity. And if you're not recovering, like less but more, but you can recover from, and then fill in the gaps with the easier, more recoverable stuff is really helpful. So, like for me, zone two is an intentional, strategic part of my training that also allows me to recover in between like really high, hard effort, more intense things within my training. So, thinking about periodizing and polarizing your cardio so you're not doing just hard, hard, hard all the time. Um, and using those for the days that you maybe are more fatigued or you don't have a specific pace or goal or output you're trying to do. And or you can use like the bike or whatever within that. So being strategic about balancing hard versus easy days is a thing that I intentionally do too with recovery and not putting too many of my hard training days back to back to back in my week. So there's definitely like a programming approach to recovery that helps that isn't like the perfect hybrid split. Listen, I have thousands of clients in my programs who weeks all look different. The numbers of days they lift and run look different. The ways they combine them look different. It's not that there's just like one optimal perfect way, but the one way to shore shot, blow yourself up is to put all of your high, hard, intense stuff like 2 to 3 days in a row. Like spread that out with easy days or rest days across the week is really like the trick to hybrid training and balance. And then of course, as you get to doing more and more and more, that's where maybe being a little bit more strategic about that. But most of you guys aren't doing like what I'm doing in a week, and that's totally fine. So just think about like spacing out hard with easy, more or less. So that's like the training approaches that I take that I think are really, really helpful for just like kind of stopping that before it even starts. And then when it comes to the rest of my life, I eat. Your girl crushes food. She eats all the time. My friend jokingly calls me the queen of maintenance. Like I am not afraid of a carb. I obviously get a pretty moderately to high protein diet. The carbs are the secret to recovery and performance when it comes to this type of stuff. And people, when they hear me say that, they think that I'm saying that everyone needs to go get diabetes and insulin resistance and eat carbs into their doom. No, match your carbs to your activity level. The more active you are, the higher carbs needs to be. It's really simple. It's a linear relationship. Like if you're on the lower end, you're on the lower end. If you're on the higher end, you need more. And so I eat a lot. I am not afraid of eating extra. If my recovery is really poor, honestly, one of my first lines of defense is like, am I eating enough? I personally track my food when I'm doing high volumes of training. I usually don't if I'm like not doing high volumes of training because I feel like it's fine. But for me, it really helps me keep a tab of like, one, am I eating enough carbs? It's really hard for me personally to intuitively eat 400 grams of carbs a day. Right. Like no matter how hard I try, I don't do it. So when I am in high training volumes and seasons, I do track what I eat because it helps me keep a tab of it. And like I use my Whoop personally, and I can tell like if I have a low recovery day and I didn't eat enough the day before, sometimes if I just eat a lot the next day, my recovery goes up. So I'm like, okay, boom, I need to adjust something here, looking at those kind of patterns. But I eat. I eat. I don't know how to explain. Like, and I eat like a higher quality diet too. So I'm getting like macros and micros. It's not just like I'm shoveling like candy into my mouth to get carbohydrates in. But I eat for both health, but and performance simultaneously because they go hand in hand. So like food is the one that is nutrition. Like nutrition is like just such a huge thing for recovery that I think so many people are so apprehensive to eat more. Or just for that. But that is like my first thing that I go to. After that, and or with that, kind of in conjunction, is sleep. And I know that people hate that one because they are like, I can't sleep, I don't have time. But like, sleep is going to more meaningfully contribute to your recovery than any extra session or any extra days or like all that stuff. That doesn't mean that your workouts are worthless if you don't sleep well. I think that's some messages that gets really construed to Gen Pop people who are like, well, I can't exercise because I'm tired. I'm like, no, that exercise is still a net positive to you. But sleeping is going to be the thing that's going to really drive the needle forward on recovery. It just is. If you can get more than 7 hours per night, that's amazing. I train at a pretty high volume for a regular person. You know, I'm not at athletic volume, high at a regular person volume. So for me, I know my body really realistically needs like 8 to 9. Or sometimes during really, 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 really hard, like after really hard long runs, I might sleep 10 hours. And I know not everyone can do that. I obviously don't have kids. My job is a lot, but it also involves me working out. But if you can get 7 hours or more a night, that will make such a difference, especially going from like 4, 5, 6 to like 7 or 8, right? Versus me going from like 8 to 9, like that helps, but it's not like the thing make or breaking me. But if you're going from those really inadequate low amounts to just like enough, that will make you feel so much better, both in the gym and then in your recovery as well. So much recovery happens when you're sleeping. And so beyond those, I mean, I walk a lot. I have a dog. I don't know if this video ever gets published. She's sleeping in the corner right now. I walk her a lot. Yeah, she's a sweetie. But that blood flow to your muscles can help just in general, like low intensity activity, that kind of stuff. Also taking deload weeks or seasons of actually recovering in between hard events. Something that's really going on in the hybrid space right now is let me do the most high, hard, intense race month after month after month. This also happens in the ultra marathoning space too, as well. And that kind of overlaps with this. And it's just maybe people with insane work capacities can do that stuff, or they're never actually peaking or doing their max best performance, but or it's for social media for the gram. But like when I run ultra marathon, I ran my 100-miler last year. I took a month off. Not a full month off, but I took a full week off, a week easy, and then a week adding, then 2 weeks to ease back into training, right? Like I'm going to run my marathon and I'm not going to jump right into my high rocks block the next week. I'm going to give myself, time to let my body recover. I think that people severely underestimate, like if you're doing these really hard races and events or activities, like depending on the intensity of them, you need to recover, right? Like there's just a stress and demand of that. So I have seasons of less intense training. I take off seasons, so to speak, less hard training. I let myself mentally and physically recover. I'm not worried about eating more if I need it for recovery, even if I gain a little bit of weight, because I know it just evens out later in the year when my training goes back again. Like I'm really neutral with like, what does my body need for me to take care of it? What does my body need to recover? What does my body need to repair? Like, I think I have this approach of like same team. I'm the same team with my body. And the more I take care of it, the better it lets me do all of these other things. And sometimes that's being like, hey, I want to watch TV for a little bit more, but you got to go to bed, Alyssa, because you need more sleep kind of thing. And being firm with myself. It's not just like letting myself do whatever I want. Or last night before I went to bed, I was still hungry and I was like, you need more carbs, girlfriend. Like, you can't just go to bed like this. Like, you're obviously hungry for a reason. Like, we got to eat a snack before we go to bed. I know you're tired. And like, that sounds silly, but like I take care of myself. And I think that helps with the recovery too, because exercise for me isn't like this punishment of expenditure or like being mean to myself. It's like, how can I make the most max out of this? Or like, I skipped my long run last week and took my dog to the trail to walk and hike because I did 3 days of really hard work and I just knew I was exhausted and that was just going to dig more into my week than I wanted it to. And do I do that all the time? No, but sometimes the answer for recovery is like you take the day off or you pull back the workout or you skip the workout or you adjust the training plan. And that's part of balancing and maintaining and recovering as well. So I know that was a little bit tangential there of all the things that I do, but I think when people think of recovery, they, I have Normatec boots and a Theragun, but those aren't what I'm doing day in and day out. They feel good. They're nice. I like them. But like really, if my recovery is trash, I know that I need to either adjust something in my training. I'm adapting and I'm just in that funk of that adaptation phase where things are building up, but my fitness hasn't caught up yet. And I just need to like pull back a little bit or I need to eat and sleep. Like I wish I had some magical hack beyond that, but that's the way that I approach this.
Honestly, though, Alyssa, like that is the magic, right? It's the
That is the
magic of
magic.
sleep, water, make sure your hydration is on point. Make sure your stress levels are low, checking in with what your actual program is, like adapting that. And also, you had mentioned deload weeks and recovery weeks. And I actually remember when you did that full, I think it was the 100-mile race, and you took the full month off, and you have a whole YouTube video of what you did kind of leading back into it. So, can you just briefly go into what a deload week is and where you would add that in your training and how that's so beneficial for people?
Yeah. So deload weeks are essentially like intentionally pre-planned weeks where you pull back and or do less. So you're doing, say, your regular lifting program, but you're doing it like an RP of like 4, 5, or 6 instead of like 7, 8, or 9. Or you're pulling back your conditioning training volume or running mileage like 30% or where it was like a month ago at that baseline. You're essentially going back to like a lower baseline or intentionally like you're keeping in frequency or effort or stimulus, but you're pulling back like the effort or the volume of it. So your body can intentionally make space to recover. Now, there's two approaches to deload weeks. One, if you're a regular person who life deloads you for you all of the time, you probably don't need deload weeks. If you have, oh, I miss a workout most of the weeks because of my kids, or I had a full vacation, or we got sick again, or whatever that is, and life's deloading you, I wouldn't worry about doing this. But if you're someone who is consistently following a program week in and week out, you're getting 80, 90% of the work there, you're doing it a lot, you can either pre-plan deload where you have like every fourth, fifth, or sixth week, I have a week that I pull back, or you can reactively deload of like, hey, you know what? Things are starting the fatigue because I think people don't, there's a lot of principles in exercise people don't realize, but fatigue builds across a block. It's not like you are perpetually going to just keep going, going, going. Like the fatigue is going to build. So you're going to feel worse at the end of a block than you are at the beginning of a block, like after a deload or recovery week or whatever it is. That fatigue is going to build. And you can either say, okay, on every X week, I'm going to pull back. Or you could just kind of train and be like, okay, when I start to feel really run down or everything starts to feel sluggish or really terrible, I'm going to reactively deload. And sometimes, like, my approach to training kind of incorporates both. Like, I have these pre planned weeks, but if I feel like I'm not recovering really well, sometimes I just pull back anyway. And I'm like, hey, we're just going to like this, my body needs this. And so with hybrid training, there's two approaches to this too, as you can deload the endurance cardio running and then the lifting on separate weeks. Honestly, I like this approach for hybrid training because, say, in a hypothetical world, you deload every 4 weeks. That's 2 weeks of doing both at a high volume in the month, and then 2 weeks of having like one be lower and one be higher, and like the opposite another week. So sometimes I like that because it allows you to kind of create space of recovery within your weeks if they're on separate weeks. But there's nothing wrong with like deloading both. Like I have every 3 months in my programs, we like do like a max out performance strength assessment. They're different every time. We're not one or maxing every time. So I had like this AMRAP testing that I did last month. Um, and I was really fatigued from my running, but also I was going on vacation the following week and I knew I needed to deload and I didn't want to deload and then go on vacation. So I deloaded both that week. And then I went back up to my regular running volume and maxed out my lifts that next week. And like that was fine, right? But then I had vacation. So even though I overshot, it was fine because then I had an easy week of training kind of planned in and I did those both at the same time. But if you're like oscillating these across training weeks, yeah, it could be nice to have both at the same point in time. But sometimes like you can also like pull back one and the other like opposingly and then creating indirectly like more recovery into your week. Or like sometimes you feel like maybe your running needs deloaded or your cardio needs deloaded, but not your lifting. Like your lifts are moving fine, you're moving fine in the gym. But for me, like sometimes my runs get slow and sluggish and they feel wonky, or I'm getting like chirpy injury stuff picked up. Like I don't need to pull back my lifting because that's happening. I might just be like, hey, I need a week that I gotta pull back the running and endurance training, and I just keep the lifting the same. So with the hybrid type stuff, there's like those two approaches to it, and that's the way that I look at it. Or just follow your program, and where they fall, they fall. Like,
Yeah.
or just
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that.
I love that. And that's kind of where we put our deload weeks in my program as well. It's like usually at that 6 to 8 week mark. Is a deload week, you had mentioned pulling back just on the actual program that you're already in, or could it be different movements? Maybe you're just doing mobility, or does it just depend?
I think there's, I guess, two approaches. You can have, some people call them pivot weeks. where instead of doing your normal program, like you go do something else for that week.
Right.
I like keeping in like some of the stimulus that you're doing, because then the next week when you go back to your program, you're going to feel like super sore and you're going to have like a readaptation and retraining week. So again, but like it depends on your goals, right?
Right.
If you're going to be more adherent because you spent a week doing like really easy recovery, something different, go for it kind of thing. Like that's fine. I view it as I'm doing what I typically do, but I'm pulling back what that looks like, or I'm doing a different variation. Maybe instead of this traditional cardio workout, I plug in something a little bit more fun and more variable that I might not do. Maybe sometimes honestly on my deload weeks, I like to just condense my list into 2 days. So then I get an extra day of recovery or an extra day like mentally off. So I don't have to think about it. Like there really aren't like these hard, like, theoretically in the literature, a deload week is just taking your normal volume and pulling it back by like 30, 40, or 50%. And like, that's really what it kind of traditionally is. But there's no hard, fast rule of what that can look for you. I think, again, it always depends on if you're doing stuff for general fitness or specific fitness and what you need from that. Like for a lot of people, it's almost like there's diet breaks with like people who like they take those diet breaks. Like you call it a training break. And if you want to spend a week just like doing things that are different and fun, and then you get back to training, like great, do that. Do a different variation of deadlift. Maybe you don't deadlift at all. Maybe you just use dumbbells that week. Maybe you do CrossFit that week because it's more fun and not your formal lift and you're taking a break from your routine. And like, that's all like totally fine too. Honestly, I do a lot more of that. Like when I'm in those post-race recoveries, I don't say I'm going run this. I'm like, hey, I'm going to go do this because this is fun. And this sounds good. And this is how I'm going to ease back in. And like, I think there's times of more rigor versus less rigor, and they're both appropriate. It just depends what's your goal and where you at in your training program, right? For me, when I deload right now in the middle of this marathon training block, I'm not doing something totally different because I need to maintain that stimulus and adaptation. Post marathon, maybe I'm just screwing around in the gym for a week, and that feels great to me.
Yeah, yeah. So this is so important to note that, and you've mentioned this like throughout the entire hour of like that you listen to your body, give it what it needs, and maybe it's something a little bit different. If someone's really kind of maybe just starting out on their fitness journey or wanting to get into hybrid training, how do they know? Like, how do they know intuitively what their body actually needs?
Yeah, I think that sometimes this came up in the other interview I did today, is a lot of people who don't come up with like a background in athletics don't know what it feels like to push themselves. So they might be more willing to pull back on themselves too prematurely, or they might not have that like deep intuition that I'm sure you kind of, you've been an athlete your whole life. I'm sure you have that too, where like I can wake up in the morning and know if I need electrolytes just by the way that I feel, or if I need carbs just by the way that I feel. Like I can go on a run and tell, I'm like, oh my glycogen stores are way too depleted. I should eat more before this. Like that sounds crazy to somebody else, but like I'm so tuned in to like these things over time that I can just tell what I need. But a lot of people don't. And so my first thing that I recommend to most people is just get a good program. Get a good program that you know that you can trust, regardless of like who it is or what it is, just depending on your goals, because that will take away so much of the guesswork for you. Because a good program should build in auto regulation and the skills for developing that, which is a big fancy science word of like adjusting the intensity, volume, training, or output based off how you feel, and will teach you how to tune into that so you can work with that and how you feel. But also the program will, but you need to as well, try to figure out what it feels like to actually do things really hard, to actually push your weights hard or push your efforts or paces and cardio hard. Figure out what max feels like. And if the sooner and quicker, obviously, like as you're starting out, nothing has to be perfect. Just get exposure, get confidence, get in it. But I'm talking like once you're kind of past that point where you're like literally Bambi, don't know what you're doing, figure out what hard feels like, because everything else will be easier when you have a true proxy of hard. And also, this sounds like really bad advice, but don't be afraid of touching the sun. Obviously, don't do it to the point of where you get hurt, but I feel like the way you learn what is too much or what is like needs to be pulled back is by sometimes messing it up. I think so beginners or people starting out are so afraid to mess something up or do it imperfectly that they don't do enough to get to that point. And failure is feedback. I have learned more about what my body needs by screwing up what it needs, by messing that up or trying and overshooting intentionally to figure out, oh, does that work for me? So a great example would be something like, how much electrolytes I need in hot, humid summer days. For years, I was just taking like maybe like one liquid IV, 500 milligrams. And then in the last few years, I started taking like an element, 1,000 milligrams per hour. And I was like, oh, wow, that felt significantly better than how I felt doing this before. I'm not getting headaches. I'm recovering better. But like, I just had to go, F around and find out to figure out like what that worked for me. And sometimes that's what fitness is. It's not just perfect execution all the time, but you get that feedback and you learn and know, okay, when do I need to adjust? So another example with lifting is like, I did not want to do my heavy back squats on Tuesday. I did a threshold 60-minute, like trying to figure out where my zone 4 line is run on Monday. So my legs felt really fatigued. So I have a lot of clients who would take that and say, I can't do this workout today. I'm not able to do this workout today. I shouldn't do this workout today. I should just and I don't want to like mock giving yourself grace or whatever, but I joked to my Instagram stories, said, didn't want to do squats today, but we compromised and I did squats today. But I wrote this whole thing in my app to my clients afterwards, explaining like I got under the bar and I don't judge the workout until I'm under the bar. And the bar moved fast and the weights moved well. And the effort of the weight that I was at last week actually felt easier this week than it was last week. And so therefore I was like, okay, I'm good. Like I don't need to modify this workout. I don't need to scale this back. Everything's moving fine. Nothing hurts. Like I'm good. I can keep going forth. And I ended up doing 10 more pounds on my top set than I did the week before because I knew, okay, how fast is this moving? How hard does this feel? What does this look like? But the only way I know that is because I've had lifts where I've overshot it and then went, oh, we're bailing on this. We got to pull back. This isn't the set. Or I've had lifts where I go in and I feel so completely wrecked that I get in and do the warm up and I go, no, this is a bad idea. I just need to take it easy today. But you kind of learn that by doing, which is the most messy advice. But like the more you do, and I think like, this is where I like the same team effect too, because you go into it not like if you don't take the diet industry view of how you view health and fitness into your gym goals or your performance goals, and you just truly take like same team, same side, we're learning each other. What does my body need kind of approach instead of this like ignore, restrict, overly push all the time view of like, well, what do we actually need? And sometimes what you actually need is to do the workout or go hard or not quit. Sometimes it's not just pulling back, right? But you learn that by doing.
You don't know until you know. And I feel like, this is a great way to end this because it's really just like take the data, try things. Failure is a good thing. I think you said failure is progress. Like that is so important to note. And we don't know if you're going to fail or what that top threshold is if you don't try. And so, that's really important of what you said about like, I feel like this way, but you got under the bar and you actually lifted heavier. Like also being able to like showcase that you can be proud of yourself and see that progress, like even though you didn't even think that you were going to be able to do it.
Yeah. And obviously, like guys was listening to this, like don't go fail to the point that you're like injuring yourself and doing too much volume or too fast, too soon. That's not what I'm saying. That's why I said like get a good program.
Get a program.
Like, plug you into it, right?
Yeah.
A lot of this is discomfort tolerance. For a lot of you, you need to learn how to be uncomfortable and push hard versus like you tend to err on not pulling back. The past athletes are the ones that I find myself saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing the power building program while training for a marathon while also adding in Metcons. Let's maybe do a little bit less. Like there's two types. You need to figure out which person are you? What advice and guidance do you need? But I encourage you in all areas of life, but I won't get on my soapbox of success, is fail faster. The sooner you fail, the more feedback you will get and the more you will improve. So don't be afraid of messing this up. Like fail faster. Like literally like, and that builds discomfort tolerance within that failure, which also makes you better at these things all the time because you're going to fail workouts. That's just part of it. But that doesn't mean that like you're broken or bad. But you will learn how to adapt in response to that over time.
Love it. Way to end this. This
my
is so great.
Talk. Pep talk.
No, it's great. It's great because it really is true. And like every other aspect of life too. We don't even have to go there, but it's like in work, in relationships, in dating, like it's everything, because then that's just data that you take and that's how you progress and evolve as a human. So, wow, that was amazing. Thank you again so much for being here. Would love to have you back on again soon when you're back in Austin. But where can people find you and learn more about you? You have a YouTube, podcast, Instagram. You're all over the place. So tell people more about where they can find you.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone creates content at such an insane level, but I think you produce content just as fast as me. So I think you feel it. I sometimes like, I see you. So I feel like you get it. So you can find me mostly on Instagram. That's my main place. I'm actually been growing YouTube a lot though. I have a ton of amazing content there and more coming, especially for hybrid training. And then my podcast, which you can watch on YouTube or listen on the go, is called The Hybrid Lab. I recently renamed it from The Messy Middle. So you might find stuff like labeled The Messy Middle, but it's The Hybrid Lab now is like how you can find that on your favorite platform. And I have all of the learning to dig into from anything that we talked about here today. If you want to go deeper, or you want to go more specific too, we got that for you.
You have everything. I will say I've been posting content for a very long time, but YouTube is a beast that I still have yet to get into. And so more power to you for putting all the content you have out there. But truly, everyone listening, you have so much content out there, so much educational stuff, and you are someone that actually does it too. So you have that experience from yourself, but also thousands of clients that you work with on a daily basis. So again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time as always. And make sure you go follow at Doc Liz Fitness.
Thank you, everybody.
Right? Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.